And now a Batuta Advocate special, our very first AFL player coming on the show to discuss things all grand final, or as they say in Victoria, the big dance, live from Baxter Booth studio. Let's get on with it. You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate on Desert Rock FM. Well, welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show on Desert Rock FM. Now, lots going on in the world this week. They've legalised marijuana in Canberra. They've decriminalised abortion in New South Wales. Our Prime Minister's overseas with Trump, doing his best to make friends with America while indirectly taking a lot of money from China. And sport is pretty much at fever pitch around the country, all football codes. AFL Grand Final this weekend, NRL next weekend, and then we, of course, head into the Spring Carnival. But the AFL Grand Final, Errol, is an interesting one this year, isn't it?
Yeah, it is an interesting one. You've got the Gold Coast Titans of the AFL have reached their first ever Grand Final. Some would say that they were never going to do it. Others were hoping that the experiment has failed, but it's quite clear that this year the experiment has been a success.
Yes, the little expansion team that could, the Greater Western Sydney Giants, are in the big dance, as they call it in Victoria, against the seasoned Grand Final veterans, Richmond. And we're today speaking to a titan of the GWS, a titan of the Giants. Dylan Buckley, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks, boys. Thanks very much. Obviously a huge fan of the show. And I will just quickly go back because you said that the Gold Coast Titans are the Giants. Now, that in fact is definitely incorrect. The Gold Coast Titans are the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah.
You cannot equivalate us to those guys. So, no, we're fantastic to be there. Obviously a new club, but as they're saying at the moment, there's a big sound of the west of the town, and we're ready to go.
You've seen the fan base grow out there. Can you tell us what that's kind of looked like in the western suburbs? Because obviously they're not starved for footy teams of any capacity. They've got the Wanderers in the A-League, which was selling out stadiums in their first ever season, and they've got about 32 NRL clubs.
And it's not a dispossessed VFL team. You know, this is a team that was built from the ground up by the AFL.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. Like, I haven't been there my whole career. Obviously, I had 6 years at Carlton, where that's one of the biggest clubs. So that's probably one of your Roosters or something like that. Yeah. And they're just incredible. So, you know, we'd go to these clinics and players would know, what stats you had on the weekend, and they know what we had for breakfast. And, they knew what stats you had. And that always wasn't good for me because, it wasn't great because I obviously didn't have many stats, and they'd obviously know that I'd been pretty crap. But moving up to the Giants, it's obviously in Sydney, and the support isn't as big. But going down to the clinics down in in Penrith and Campbelltown, and seeing those kids down there, the first question was, "Do you play for the Doggies?" Yeah. And it wasn't. We're wearing orange and charcoal, but I've only been here for 2 years now, and it's definitely taken much more of a liking. The clinics now, they're not just throwing the balls back at us, they're trying to kick and handball, and I think it's definitely making an imprint up here in Sydney, especially if we can bring that cup home this weekend. It's going to be huge.
How much of the audience do you think you've poached off the other team in Sydney? I think they're called the Swans, are they? They
South Melbourne Swans.
Yeah, they are, because they've been up here since 1982.
Yeah,
and they do have quite a rusted on fan base. You've got the old ones who come up from Melbourne to go to Sydney, and then you've got the new ones. But that team is basically the nicer parts of Sydney, where people tend to have a larger disposable income, and they can enjoy things, like going to multiple sporting events a year.
Yep.
Have you had many people jump across? Have you had people come over to say, now we have a team where I'm from? Yeah,
definitely. I think it's massive. Like you said, I think the Western Sydney is, nearly probably double what the East has. There's so many people out there, and for me, coming from Victoria, I just never realised how big Western Sydney actually was. You drive an hour and you're hitting Penrith. It's pretty much like Geelong of Victoria, I suppose. And it's absolutely incredible how big that target market is. And when you look at it from the numbers perspective, you can see why the AFL made a team. Mm-hmm. In terms of the poaching the supporters, I know that there is definitely a few guys that have jumped ship. A lot of people come over to me and always say, I support the Giants because I hate the Swans, and you just want to sort of stick it up the other guys that support the Swans. So I suppose there's a bit of rivalry like that. I suppose there's a lot of people that have sort of jumped on board recently as the guys have gone really well. And, if you go to the best thing for me, and if you look at it from a serious and a multicultural sort of way. You go to our games, and the amount, like the vast array of people that come to the games is incredible. You've got people from all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, and ethnicities, and it's just like a really, really beautiful place to see. And it's just incredible what the guys have done. They make it such a good experience. I know you guys met Stephen Canelio, who was in here last week, who just signed a massive deal, but he heads up the multicultural side of it, being an Italian boy himself. So he's obviously big in that aspect, and I think the crowd's definitely getting around it.
It's is that a big thing? Are you starting to see finding kids from different backgrounds starting to show up at clinics and starting to get eyeballs on them at like a scouting level?
Oh, 100%, mate. I think even in for a long time now, the AFL's been absolutely huge on its diversity, and that's something they're really proud of. You see guys like Majak Dor, Mariab Chol, one of the guys that is in selection for Richmond this week, from Sudanese descent, and they're just absolutely incredible athletes. Especially up here in the West, we've got young kid, Nick Shipley, who's actually from the West. He was the first guy drafted that's from Western Sydney, Nick Shipley. So he's from a soccer background, translated into footy. He's actually from Peruvian descent, so he's absolutely killing it and really come a long way. So, yeah, obviously in the West there's a diverse range of cultures, and they're all welcome, and it's absolutely incredible.
It is interesting what you're saying there about homegrown talent. So you've already got a Western Sydney boy playing, because it took the Melbourne Storm about 15 years to get someone that came out of the grassroots out there.
Who was that? I've never heard of anyone in Melbourne playing league.
He was an Islander guy, and he didn't play for that long. But it was that was such a novelty. After 15
to have
years,
one Victorian.
They had a Victorian guy that came to the grassroots, which we didn't know existed. So
well, the Sydney talent these days is incredible. At the Giants, we get some young guys that get to train with us all the time. I think this year in the draft, there's probably 3 of them that are actually from New South Wales, which is just incredible, really, when you think about it.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about like the draft? You actually were able to avoid it because of a historic
just like
bylaw.
Gibson's dad.
Yeah, the bylaw, Ben Cousins' law. You were able to be brought in through descent into Carlton.
Yes, so
through the father-son law.
That's it. Father-son law. Yeah.
Straight into the spoon team.
Yeah. So obviously you guys don't have it in league, but there's a father-son rule that if your dad plays over 100 games for a club, you're eligible to go to that team, and they have first preference. So back in the day, it used to be you would go into the draft, and then if you agreed with that team, you just get taken with their last pick. Yeah. So you'd get like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks in the team, which was incredible because you look at a team like Geelong who won 3 flags in 5 years, and they had guys like Gary Ablett Jr., Matthew Scarlett, Tom Hawkins, who were like first round picks. They'd be taken some of the best players of all time, and they would have been taken in the first 3 picks of the draft.
Yeah, for sure.
And they got taken last. Yeah. So now there's a bit of a different way to do it. It's you still have first preference, but there's a bidding system. So if you bid on me now, I have to match it with a pick that would be around that area.
Okay.
So traditionally, it's been an incredible rule, but now it's starting to catch up. You saw there's a guy, Nick Blakey, who plays for the Swans, he's going to be an absolute incredible player, and his dad played for the Swans, and I think Giants actually bidded on him at pick 5, so Sydney had to match that and come up.
So, as a boy, you were heading out to the G to watch your father play for Carlton. Did you always want to go and play for Carlton, or did you have your own team?
No, I loved the Blues as growing up. It was funny, I was never actually really into footy a lot. I was a bit of a weird kid, and I only sort of played just because all my mates did. Yeah. And, so obviously, Dad had finished by the time I was born, but he would always take me down to the club. I was just looking at
these premierships here, 79, 81, 82, maybe a bit before your time.
He would take me down to the rooms, and I'd love it. So I obviously grew up there, and it was always something that I wanted to do. Funny story, if you got time, when I was 17, the Giants, that was the year that they actually formed, and they had the opportunity to pre-list 12 17-year-olds, and I was in that group of 17-year-olds born between January and April, and they could pick 12 of us. So basically I had the opportunity to come up here as one of the first inaugural players, but Carlton said that they would say that they'd pick me up, so I ended up staying in Melbourne with family, did my extra year in year 12, and then they got drafted me the year after. But it's funny the way it goes, because I'm a big believer in power of the mind and whatnot, and I think that the whole time, looking back now, that was always in my head. And I ended up coming down here 6 years later and ended back up at the club. So it's pretty funny how it all works.
Tell us, was it a relief when you finally got on the field for Carlton? You know, as the son of a footballer, was it? You know, at least it's hard having, you know, an old man that's won 3 premierships, I'm sure, but like. You know, you got there and your first touch, you kicked a goal.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about stats earlier. That's a pretty good one to pin your chest.
It is a good stat. Yeah, it is. But yeah, it's a funny one. People always ask me if I felt pressure and everything about Dad. Obviously, he was a super player, and yeah, 3 flags is just incredible, especially these days. It just doesn't happen. But in saying that, you know, he was always my dad. I never had another dad. I didn't know what it was like to sort of grow up normally. For me, that was normal. So I never really put too much pressure on myself, to be honest. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't like being under pressure, but I feel like being under pressure brings out the best in me. So maybe I should have put myself under a bit more pressure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, look, I loved my time at Carlton. My first 2 years were very slow. I was a young kid. I had no idea. You know, I think if I look back now, knowing that I was going to go there at 17 was probably the worst thing that ever happened to me, because I just didn't realise how hard you had to work to get somewhere. And I thought, well, this is, you know, I look back and it sort of just got handed to me on a plate, and I got to Carlton as an 18-year-old and just thought it was all going to happen, and it didn't. And yeah, it took some very hard conversations with people to pull me into line. And I remember having a chat with Heath Scotland, who's just one of the, you know, my favourite people I've ever met in footy. He was an absolute superstar. He won a lot of people's hearts at footy. He's actually just coaching North Melbourne now, and he said to me, he's like, mate, you know, this isn't just going to happen. Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, like, no one's just going to rock up and make you do it. Like, if you want to do it, you got to do it yourself. And the way you're heading, you know, you can maybe play a couple games and then you'll be out the door. And that sort of really hit me, and I thought, far out, that's, you know, pretty scary, and it could be pretty embarrassing. You know, if they've signed me for 3 years, meant to be this good thing, and never sort of came to. So it was incredible for me. Obviously played in my third year about 18 games and was available for, played every game I was available for, and yeah, it was a really, really big moment in my career, I suppose.
Could you kind of see that happening with other players around you as well? Do you see that, you know, because some kids wouldn't have to have that conversation with themselves. Some kids, and it always tends to be in all codes of footy, it's the lunatics that kind of don't ever have to think anything, like, you know, because, you know, you've got your Joey Johns, you've got your Shane Warne, you've got your
Gary Ablett,
King Carey, you know, like, what's that like seeing a kid that's almost bulletproof just because of their talent?
Yeah, it is scary. I think, like, there's, like you said, talent's not everything. You got to have the work ethic, because everyone, you know, once you get to the AFL, everyone's talented. Everyone's got their skills. Yeah, right. I think, like, my last, you know, 2 years at the Giants, I've really taken a liking to helping out the young boys that come into the system, and, you know, I sort of see a lot of those guys in me and what I did do wrong and what I did do right, and mainly what I did wrong, to be honest. And I sort of just catch them out and I say, boys, you know, don't be ever happy playing in the twos. Like, while you're here, you know, even though you're playing in the twos at the moment, you're 18 years old, you're available for selection. There's no way you should be thinking that you're not meant to be playing. And I think, like, I wish that someone helped me out with that a little bit when I was younger, because when I was 18 and 19, physically I probably wasn't ready, but mentally I just was like, I'll just do this for 2 years and, you know, hopefully it works out. Yeah. And I try and catch up with the young boys now and be like, don't wait, you know, like, these guys, as much as we're best mates, we're all competitors, and if you push him, he's going to push you, and that's what you want in a footy club, and that's what the Giants have got, to be honest. These boys that have come in this year, some of these young guys, Connor Ryden, Xavier O'Halloran, they're just some awesome players, and I think living up here as well, you don't have the pressure on you like you do in Melbourne, and they're going to be some super, super guys.
So tell us about the road to the finals that the Giants have been on this season. I mean, they've had a few close calls with the finals, a few big dances, but this is the biggest one they've been in. What's been different, you think, about this season compared to last season and the season before that?
Yeah, I think the boys, we really set ourselves up well throughout the year, and played some good footy. It's a credit to Leon Cameron. He's an incredible coach, and really he stays so calm, and I think that's the one thing that you got to do when you're in that leadership position. And he never really panicked at all, and nor should he. But we had a bit of a form slump just going into the finals. We lost to Hawthorn by about 50 points, which was, you know, a stage where you probably could panic. But he just brought everyone in and said, boys, like, we know we can do it. We're going to be sweet. Let's just really just get together now and have a big build up for the finals. And I remember that being probably a chat that, like, really, you know, was really switched everyone on. And I think we played the Bulldogs in the first final at home after they just absolutely smoked us the week before. And they were coming back up to Giant Stadium to play us. And I knew that if the boys switched on, which they were going to, and we won that first final, it was all about momentum. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm a big believer that finals is about momentum. And we beat the Bulldogs, who were nearly the best informed team. And then we went and played Brisbane, who were the next second informed team at their home, beat them. And then I think once we beat them, I knew that we were onto something special. Flew down to Melbourne, obviously beat Collingwood in front of one of the biggest crowd differentials that's, seen. And I think that, like people were sort of saying, it's not an us versus them mentality, but it's just sort of facts that, we don't have the biggest supporter base, so you do shield together and just, dig deep. And I'm just so proud of the boys. But there's one more game to go, and I know that that's going to be the biggest one.
At the start of the season, did anyone say something? Did anyone say, "Oh, we might be on here"? Like at the how early in did people start thinking we might be getting to where you're at now?
Well, the guys have been in the finals 4 years in a row. Yep. So I think in 2016 they made the prelim.
Premiership window.
Yeah, they made the prelim then. I think the finals next year they might have made the prelim. Then I came up last year. We lost the first or second final, and this year obviously making the grand final. So the boys they've got no doubts on where they're at. Like they're very confident and confident in their abilities and where we're at. So I think that it's always been a goal. It's just actually doing it. It's harder. It's harder said than done because there's so many teams that want to be there in September and only 2 get there.
Don't it have to be one of the most successful expansion clubs in any code in Australia?
Yeah,
surely.
Yeah.
Western Force never got there. None of the.
Except the Storm, really.
Yeah.
And if you look at if you love your AFL, which I know you boys do, you look at the players that we've lost over the last 3 years. It's a massive credit to the club to sustain this sort of playing ability, because you look at some of the players that were lost, like Dylan Shield and Tom Scully, Rory Lobb,
Izzy
Flower. Yeah, exactly. So it's incredible. He's a big loss.
Now, you tell us a little bit about moving out of. I mean, you grew up in Fitzroy.
Yes.
You basically grew up in the middle of the city. Within a couple clicks of you, there were 6 AFL clubs.
Yep.
And quite an urban environment. What's it like moving up to Sydney? I'm assuming you might live closer to the water.
Yeah, much closer to the water. To be in a place where you're playing the sport you love, but you don't have to deal with a lot of the media scrutiny, and you can go about your life the way that you want.
You'll buy Gatorade at 2 a.m. if you want to,
you can get an Indian home diner at 3 and walk home and no one cares, and it is definitely. It's definitely a beautiful spot, so I'm all for Sydney.
Were you copping that as a young fella in Melbourne? With the, because we know it is a religion down there, and you would have been like, was that an issue going out and getting on the piss being recognised?
Yeah, look, I was never the biggest player in Melbourne, but it is definitely prevalent, and there's nothing wrong with it either. The crowd there and the supporters in Melbourne are the best people in the world. They're just so passionate and. They always just want to say g'day and hang out, which I'm all for. But there is those times that you sort of just want to do your own thing.
You cop a bit of a spray ever? Or it's like...
Did I cop a spray? I've never copped a spray to my face, but yeah, geez, I cop a. Twitter's magnificent. So if you ever want to feel shit about yourself,
that's a kind of a
just go on there and just if you really want to find if you don't know what's wrong with you, just go on Twitter and find out.
So. This is a final that has been played out a few times. It's a Melbourne team and a team that's not from Melbourne. Do you think that the whole of Melbourne is behind Richmond?
Definitely not. Like, Richmond have a massive support. I think they've probably got one of the best supporter bases in the AFL, if not in Australia. I think the biggest membership base, or it might be just behind Collingwood, but their crowd is just incredible. They get around their song, the big yellow and black, and they absolutely love it. So they've got a massive, massive supporter base, but I'm pretty sure, from what I'm hearing at the moment, a lot of people that, aren't with Richmond are jumping on the bandwagon. Yeah. So, yeah, they're all very, very welcome to get down there on Saturday and support, and by all reports that they are.
Yeah, so it's kind of like
people love the underdog.
Yeah, it's an underdog story.
In the AFL Grand Final, like, if your team is in the final, then you get like a certain allotment of the stadium, right?
Yes.
And do you think that the Giants are going to be able to fill it? I mean, like, it's a long way down, and that is a big coliseum.
Yeah, it is. It is. Look, I think that it's going to be a sellout no matter what. Yeah. The exact percentages I'm not sure. Look, it definitely will be. You know, you can definitely say that it's going to be majority Richmond supporters, but. You know, as I like to say, there's a big sound the west of the town, and the supporters that we have got, there might be few, but they're very loud, and hopefully the rest are going to jump on board.
Yeah. So if the Giants win, you know, what do you think the impact will be in Western Sydney? Like, do you think that now that they have a team out there that's one of the key things in expanding sport in any time is winning?
100%.
I mean, you've seen sports like rugby union, which used to be enormous back at the back end of the 90s when they were winning the Bledisloe, the World Cup, the Tri-Nations. They were huge. Then they went through a spate where they didn't win anything, and now, you know, you barely hear anything from them.
Yeah.
Bit like swimming at the Olympics. 2000, swimming was Australia's national sport.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes through highs and
Australia is
lows.
very good at jumping on bandwagons.
They're
very good at just, you know, claiming things that, you know, that we like. And, you know, I'm all for that. I'm more than happy. I think that, like you said, success is the key indicator for people jumping on board. And you look at a team like Brisbane Lions in the AFL, they won 3 flags in 2000, and they had a massive supporter base. Obviously, they came from Fitzroy in Victoria, but travelled up. And now that Brisbane was successful again, they all just jumped on. They were selling out their stadium, and it was, you know, from all reports, one of the best places to be. With the Giants, I definitely feel that, you know, once you win a flag, a lot of people are going to jump on board.
Legitimise.
It'll be huge.
Yeah, I remember it's always a funny yarn up in Brisbane, all those clubs. And there's some suburban clubs that do pretty well for creating talent up there. There's Mount Gravatt, there's Morningside.
Although it's not a part of the world where you'd be wearing a scarf or a beanie ever.
Or a singlet.
You know?
But what they've found is some of these clubs, suburban footy clubs, have guys drinking at the bar every day who have relocated from Fitzroy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, just
because of the...
wow,
of that's Lions. Huge.
That's a real sick.
I wouldn't say just because, you know, maybe because...
uprooted
the
at
weather's
50
a bit
years old.
nicer, you know.
Well, I can see
I don't
the weather,
think you'd have to...
Uprooted their families and followed their club and had to find a job.
That's huge. The AFL has some of the most passionate supporters, and, you know, the game's nothing without the supporters, so kudos to them. It's a big move.
Now, midway through your career, through this season, Dyl, you kind of started dabbling in media.
Yes.
Which is something you're mad not to, because unlike most professional sportsmen, you can string a sentence together. Now, tell us about when that started coming to you. Was that early on in the career, or was it something you kind of looked at?
Oh, look, I've always had fun just talking. I love talking crap, and find that, you know, it was, if that was ever something that I could think of being a career, it would be huge. But I think in my first sort of touched on when I was at Carlton, you know, you just focus on footy and that's it. And when it all finished for me at Carlton, I got delisted in 2016, which delisted, I don't know if you know what that means. It means that you get fired pretty much from your job. And I had nothing. Like, that's very dramatic. I had a lot. I had a lot of things, but I had no job. I had a mortgage, and I was like, well, shit, what am I going to do? I had sort of no, you know, qualifications. I hadn't really thought too much about it. And I thought, you know, like, if I get another opportunity, I'm going to make the most of it. Yeah, Giants came knocking on the door, and I'm forever grateful for that. Moved up to Sydney, and I just never wanted to have that feeling again that I had all my eggs in one basket.
Treading on water.
Yeah, just didn't want that ever again. So, yeah, started my own podcast, Dyl and Friends, in which I just interviewed my teammates. It started out just interviewing my teammates, and basically it was sort of a thing in my own head, and I can be honest with this. It was like, well, look, if I go up to Sydney and it lasts 1 year, at least I've got like a little bit of a showcase that when I come back, I can just be like, hey, like, can I have a job? Because, you know, I've done this. And, you know, at least I hadn't done nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of really enjoyed it. And now, you know, I'm up to me sort of 26 episodes now. And
Number one
podcast in sport, which is huge. And obviously got a lot of help from you guys at Batuta and Diamantina Studios. Come in here and use a studio, and it's been absolutely fantastic. And yeah, just absolutely loving it.
That's a crowded space to be in. What was going on in that podcast that kind of triggered everyone?
To be honest, you know, my biggest quote in the podcast is just be yourself. Everyone else is taken. And I just have a bit of a joke around with the boys. And I sort of find that a lot of guys in the AFL are scared of the media because of what's reported. And I feel like when they sit down with me and have a chat, we're just chatting as mates, and they can just be as open and free as they want. Something that, if they say something that doesn't want to be in there, I'll take it out.
Yeah.
And it's just a bit of fun. So it started with my teammates. You know, I've done a lot of guys from other teams. I've done cricketers now as well, Australian cricketers, and got some big ones coming up, which is huge. So I just love sort of sitting down with people and just getting to know them as other people other than athletes.
Yeah, it's always blown me away how you've got these people who can play 4 quarters of high contact AFL, and then the first thing that they do is they walk off and they go and talk to a journalist. I think that's probably the hardest road into getting into the media at the off season. Like, I can see Cameron Smith doing it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really do that much on the field anymore. He's a bit of an old goat now.
But it is true. Like that is an elite skill in itself, being able to walk off and give a press conference. But you did say some of the blokes, not everyone has that skill, and some of the blokes are a bit nervous about the media because of, the media actually is one of the biggest hazards in your kind of career, is one of the biggest hurdles and one of the biggest kind of things you need to navigate around. Have you seen anyone get stitched up?
Definitely. Like, I think, we were talking about it earlier off air about Australia and its tall poppy syndrome. And it's funny, you look at sports like in the NFL and that, and, they just tell you how good they are.
Yeah. And
they don't care what they say. Mm-hmm. But, we have media liaisons at the club, and it's like, this is what we need to say. Don't touch about this. 4 quarters, we'll get the 4 points and we'll reassess. And there's just all these cliches that need to be used because of media. You sort of feel like they are trying to catch you out on something you don't want to say. A funny one, I remember one of my first years at Carlton, Mitch Robinson, who's one of my ex-teammates, he sort of says what he thinks, and he was on the footy show, and he sort of made a comment about Melbourne, saying that they play bruise-free footy, and which is just, it is sort of having a bit of a dig, but he didn't really mean it in a negative way. But that was one of the biggest things that ever happened in Victoria after those comments. It was just incredible the way it sort of blew up. So from there, we were having coaching once a week on what to say and what not to say, and
media training.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. No, you can see some people that haven't really taken it in. Obviously, there's iconic moments, Brownlow medals, and people getting hit with a camera
plenty
after being overly refreshed.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the things that you guys as players are kind of educated on? There was a few things this year with betting and stuff like that, and young blokes can't really be accused of being involved in organised crime just because they're putting a few bets on, but they also shouldn't do it, and they can't be kind of more educated on that. But still, it still happened for some poor buggers down south.
Yeah, it is crazy, mate. We do a lot of education, especially the first years. They have an induction camp as soon as they get drafted, so it goes for about 3 days, and it just covers absolutely everything. And then we sit down once a year with the AFLPA, the Players Association, and go through it again just as a refresher. So the main sort of things that we focus on are the illicit drugs policy and the anti-doping policy, which obviously in the AFL at the moment has popped up again. We go through the sexual conduct sort of policy as well, making sure that that's all clear. We go through the alcohol game plan. We go through gambling. We go through mental health. So the AFL really set up, us for, a lot. So there is a lot of help there for those guys. But obviously, it's such a big organisation. A lot of guys there. Sometimes there's going to be some mishaps, but we try and we feel like it's pretty good at the moment.
A lot of downtime too. How did you deal with that early in your career? Because at 18, 17, what are you going to do with yourself?
Oh, mate, I know. I wish I could go back and speak to myself as an 18, 19-year-old. I think I should just go to training, come home and sleep on the couch, watch movies. Now I don't have a spare minute, so it's funny how it changes. But yeah, a lot of those guys, like you said, they move interstate. They don't have family, they don't have friends in Victoria besides ones from the footy club. So, that's probably where sometimes some of the problems start, I suppose. But there is a lot of support there. But yeah, you got to fill your time. That's what the one thing I always talk to the young guys about is, and it's easy to say now because I've done it, but engagement off field is huge. I feel like it's probably not just with footy, but just for life. You got to be engaged, and I always say just try things because you might not find what you want to do, but you find what you don't. I sat down with that many people when I was at Carlton. I was doing real estate, property development, which is what 99% of footy players sort of transition into, and that and coaching. And those sort of three, I tried them all out, and I said, look, they're not for me. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try it. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you need to do.
Gaming's a big thing now with players.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of kill an afternoon doing that kind of stuff, but that is where you can find trouble.
We had a guy at the club, and throughout the year we'll sort of started pre-season, we're talking about things that we're going to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And guys were like saying, I'm going to cut out chocolate for the rest of pre-season, and I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to do this, and one of the I won't name him, but one of the young 18-year-olds said, I'm going to keep my Xbox to under 1 hour a night. And I was like, how long are you playing like now? Like 1 hour a night is I don't feel like that's a sacrifice unless you're playing like 12 hours a day, which I'm scared to think that he probably was.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah, well, otherwise I guess you'd just be doing a whole heap of cardio.
Just cross training.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess, like you can always tell an AFL player from, a rugby league player or a union player or a cricketer.
Is it because
they just look like they can just run a lot.
Very slender.
Yeah.
Slender, yeah. I'm probably not the best prototype for an AFL player. I think that's a funny thing up in Sydney. And the best thing for me is you sort of look at me and be like, oh, that guy's probably just on lunch break at school or something in his casual clothes. So it works well.
Yeah. So what are your tips for the grand final, mate? What do you reckon's happening? And you can, if you don't want to jinx, you can touch wood. But tell us how do you think it's going to go down?
Mate, look, I'm very. It's easy for me to say because I'm not playing, but I have such belief in the boys, and I just know what such a good group they are, and I know how hard they are. Like some of the boys are just so tough. Like I'm talking, I've never seen anything like it. And I've played with some good players, so I'm really excited to go down to the game. Obviously, I think we're going to win.
Yep.
If we do everything right and we play our game and we implement what we need to, there's no reason why we can't be holding up the cup.
All right, Dyl. Well, we're not going to hold you any longer because we know you've got a ticket on the big red and white bus down to Melbourne this afternoon. So thank you for joining us and good luck to your Giant men.
Boys, thanks so much for having me.
Go the high vis orange.